I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Michael, who's going to continue on the same levee subject and address more of the economic issues.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about our economic approach and, in our view, the correct way to think about the economics of levees. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of island-by-island cost-benefit analysis and how it applies here. And I'm going to talk some about information that we've been relying on from the DREAM studies recently as we've been asked to look at more benefit-cost analysis. So I do have a number of slides. The first one is just a quote from the fifth draft of the Delta plan that I call Delta Levee Economics, a Narrow but Common View. Now, this quote has been pointed out to me multiple times, and actually the quote is factually correct. There's nothing that's incorrect in the quote. The cost of maintaining, improving, and repairing these levees may be more than the assessed value of the use of the land they protect in some cases. This creates an uncertain future for Delta agriculture and the associated economy of those residents who depend upon it today. So I don't have a problem with the quote as factually correct, but I consider it to be more of a problem statement and a start to thinking about the economics of levees. Economics of levees are a lot more than just thinking about the market value of the land on one side of the levee and the cost of maintaining or rebuilding it. The island-by-island benefit-cost approach, problems, there are problems with that. I actually was a lot more favorably inclined to this approach. It appeals to my economist who likes to study efficiency. It appealed to that side of me, but I've become less convinced this is a good approach after working on this project. One is that I've had lots of engineers tell me that it's not a valid approach. The first engineers that tell me that were Pike and Conrad in the Economic Sustainability Plan. And then I also read it in two different technical documents from the Department of Water Resources, a background memorandum for their investment framework, as well as their 2008 report to the legislature about DREAMs that warned about this approach because of the system aspects of a levee system. And then the independent review panel for the ESP, Gilbert and Mark Hewson, also came and made the same comment. So there seems to be some engineering problems with the approach that need to be considered. I also mentioned that some studies that look at this approach, but not all, but some can minimize the public safety aspect of things and the protection from the loss of life. So when we're comparing property values, let's not lose sight of the public safety aspects that are behind the levees. Some other things that are important to point out that have already been discussed today. If we think about if we're going to think about this, we need to make sure we have the cost of levee upgrades and failures correct. And I like the structure of the DREAMS approach, but it's important to have up-to-date data on the levee system, which was a surprise to me that it wasn't as readily available when we began this project. So some of the studies that take this approach don't have up-to-date data, or at least what we have today, and are starting from a point where you've got 560 miles that require upgrades to the PL 8499. So obviously it's a lot more expensive proposition if you think that there's a lot more work that needs to be done. Our estimates were 350 miles, and we've talked about how the new DWR maps calculated 326 miles. You also want to make sure that you're looking at the cost of failure and the cost of repair from events correctly. They're not all the same, and so all I'll say is not every levee failure is a 2004 Jones Tract event. That was above average in terms of scale and cost for recovery from. And a lot of the things that we can do that are being done and will be done to improve emergency response and management through the Delta plan will actually reduce these costs as well. So we need to think about the cost of repair. There's an influential paper by Sudith et al. That's often quoted. I thought took a step towards a broader view of levee benefits. and this is a benefit cost study, and it does look at more than just the property value behind the levee. It looks at that and expands the view a little bit and says, you've got costs of if you lose an island that's got state highways and railroads on it, then you've got to account for the costs of elevating those structures. So those are in there. It has the value of residential and commercial structures in there from Dreams. Has some system costs on it, some accounting for upgrade of adjacent levees in it. So that's a study, and you've seen the results of that study that, at its highest level said 20-some islands aren't worth upgrading or repairing. There's some issues with that. So I think it's important, before you lean too heavily on that, it's important that you understand the values that are involved there and we think it's important to take a more comprehensive view. And this is accepting the validity of the island-by-island nature, which some people don't even accept to begin with. First of all, what's the economic value of farmland? This is something that's been discussed. And if you just look at the property value, or you calculate a capitalized value of future expected net profits, then the value of farmland is pretty low. It's relatively low. However, what is the economic value that's actually generated by that land and farming? Scores of studies, as well as state policy, recognize that the value of farmland is much, much, much higher than that. For instance, the value to the economy that's generated by the farmland, remember the profits that make up the appraised value of the farmland is just a residual of all the income that's actually generated by the farming activity. And so I would argue that it's important to use a broader measure of value added, which includes, those profits, includes wages to employees, that farming generates income for people, tax revenue that's generated by that farming activity, income that's paid to that suppliers receive from keeping the activity going, and we know how that process works. But that's the proper way to think about the economic value from a societal standpoint that's generated by that farming activity. Now, from a value-added measure, low-value crops in the Delta, the field crops would generate about $1,000 in value added per acre per year. The higher value stuff quite a bit higher. But if we just look at the lower value crops and you capitalize $1,000 per acre per year, just say you use a 5% discount rate, you're at $20,000 per acre, not $2,000 per acre. And so when you compare property values, I don't think you're fully capturing that. We also know that farmland has a lot of social values that are non-market in nature. Open space, we hear about food security and the wildlife habitat and these other values, and it's important to account for those. We have lots of state policies.
Dr. Michael, let me just ask you a question.
Yeah.
Are you asking us to adjust the Delta Plan to award value calculations beyond what is required by law when government acquires property? I mean, if that's right, I'm open to that argument, and I think that's where you're headed. But I think you ought to state it if that's what's.
I'm not saying actually that when the government acquires purchases property. I think what I'm talking about is at a planning level, and you say if you're deciding whether it's worth investing in this levee system or not, that you need to
on the cost benefit
on a cost benefit basis, you should look at that. And so as you form the plan, that you should look at it in this broader level. And in referring to state policy, I'm just pointing out that we have a whole host of state policy that recognize these broader values of farmland, starting from the Williamson Act and county zoning plans, federal policy that gives tax breaks for conservation easements, et cetera, et cetera. There's a broad recognition of these broader values. Other economic values of levees that can be overlooked, and it's important to include these if you're going to take an island-by-island view. One is let's pay attention to recreational values. Again, the levees define the water channels. So recreational values that in fact are created and connected to levees. We know levees provide benefits for water quality for municipal industrial users. We know they provide benefits for water conveyance. We know that they protect critical energy infrastructure, which has a statewide basis. The levees have a role in maintaining the deep water shipping channels, which is always a challenge, maintaining those depths out there in the shipping channels. The levees protect wildlife habitat and can provide wildlife habitat if we were to invest in them in the way that we discuss. And also when you look at businesses and homes, it's true there's an assessed property value of businesses and homes that are protected by levees, but when you think about the damages to those businesses and homes that they fail, it goes beyond the structure value. You're talking about a disruption of business activity and lives, which goes somewhat beyond that. And there's historical and cultural values. And I'll mention in a second that one of the reasons I like the DREAM study is actually it was extremely comprehensive in looking at all of these aspects of it. But taking this broader view, because I'm still inclined to like benefit-cost comparisons and want to achieve efficiency, and again, apologies for what happened to the slide titles. I won't work through it now, but if you get into the details of the 300-page ESP, we did, and much to Dr. Pike's objection, I said that there are 4 islands that I think
Not so.
Not so. But looking at this, we came up with 4 islands that probably may not justify the PL 8499 upgrade on this level. And the reason I point that out is that our recommendation regarding the PL 8499 standard is not just a rejection of the concept of prioritization or benefit cost. It is the result of working through it. And so these are the 4 islands, the total levee miles and the levee miles that are not a PL 8499 according to the recent DWR data set. They total 15.7 miles on the 4 islands. We got 9.28 of them that are already at PL 8499. And so the cost of taking these ones up to PL 8499 would be 6.5 miles of levee. So our concern is that that prioritization is needed, but maybe not at the PL 8499 level. It's the going beyond PL 8499. We don't see a lot of cost savings on a benefit cost basis when we look at it and we look at the levees from a more comprehensive point of view. So that's just to show you our reasoning using that framework.
Could I just